Of the media, welcome to the PPP Weekly Press Conference. I have here with me the GS of our party, Comrade Clement Ruhi. He will be reading two statements, after which we will be fielding questions. GS.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The first statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party would like to reiterate that it is not unmindful of the opposition's clandestine connections to drug lords and violent criminal gangs. In the past, the plethora of politically orchestrated violent acts which were unleashed on innocent Guyanese and the public pronouncements by some members of the opposition would serve to vindicate the party's position. While it is not the party's intention to invoke the painful memories of those who suffered, we feel compelled to remind all of some of the incidents which remain a blotch on our country's history. Patriotic Guyanese are still grappling with the indignation of the national flag, the golden arrowhead, being used publicly to drape the coffin of the then wanted criminal Blackie. In the presence of the then leader of the PNC and former president of Guyana, the late Desmond Hoy. The encouragement and acceptance of such desecration to the foremost symbol of our nationhood by someone who held the highest office not only remains unforgivable, but is the pinnacle of the embracement of lawlessness and criminals by the hierarchy of the opposition. This is the same opposition which today, emboldened with denial, is attempting to spew accusations at our party through unremitting misinformation. It begs the question, why was such a wanted criminal treated with such adoration by the PNC's leadership? Not satisfied with the customary instilling of fear, the opposition embraced as freedom fighters the 5 hardened criminals who staged a daring escape from the Camp Street prison in 2002. Following their escape, these so-called freedom fighters began a reign of terror which gripped the nation and resulted in the loss of innocent lives. Today, many who survived, including children, remain traumatized and mentally scared for life. The brazen and irresponsible broadcasting of an interview conducted by someone from the opposition camp with one of the escaped bandits who daringly brandished a high-power assault weapon not only further drove fear into the hearts of our countrymen and women, but is indicative of the seemingly engendered spirit of fraternity that exists between the opposition and criminal elements. The party also recalls the now infamous conversation between 2 current members of parliament of the main opposition, one of whom served in the highest capacity in law enforcement. That chilling conversation revealed the extent to which some of those who are now casting aspersions went to derail interventions which could have made a difference to save the lives of those who were slain by ruthless gunmen in an Upper East Bank village on that fateful day. This blatant subversion of preventative action can only be interpreted as a deliberate attempt to thwart committed officers from discharging their duties and to shield criminal elements. That conversation also unveiled the callous mindset of those in question to clutch at any mechanism to endanger and entrap others in an effort to settle scores. Yet today, this is the same opposition that condemns the government efforts to continue to secure our nation, but refuse to support the Firearms Amendment Bill and the SWAT unit. Like many Guyanese, the PPP remains shocked as to how and why police evidence in the form of a video surveillance tape from closed-circuit cameras was removed from a crime scene where a prominent businessman was killed on the east coast of Demerara. It is believed that this tampering of evidence was allegedly perpetrated by a high-ranking official of one of the parliamentary political parties who now seem to be embroiled in an allegation, in an alleged fraud that is in the public domain. The question must be asked, who was being protected as a result of such alleged tampering? What was the motive? The answer to this will be most useful in understanding the nexus between the opposition and violent criminal gangs. It must be noted that the crime spree alluded to occurred at a time when an entire village was held at ransom by the freedom fighters and their protégés. History will reveal the opposition repeated related actions and its proclivity to swiftly defend criminal elements while condemning law enforcement, who valiantly risked their lives to protect the nation from violence, which surged following the opposition's slow fire, more fire campaign. Those who were beaten, robbed, and maimed, and those who had their properties looted and burned, can attest to such brutality. What was even more callous and cold-hearted was for the surviving relatives of Louis Ignan, Bartica, and Lindo Creek massacres to see lawyers associated and who are part of the leadership of the opposition clamoring to defend the perpetrators. These incidents are just an inkling of examples of the atrocities perpetrated on Guyanese at the hands of the opposition and the criminal gangs. For the opposition to label as slander these public pronouncements, which highlight the harsh consequences some were forced to endure, has once again demonstrated their wanton disregard for the lives and well-being of Guyanese. The party is also cognizant of how the opposition seems comfortable when it levels accusations against us, but becomes extremely perturbed when we respond. We therefore remain unsurprised at the action of the Speaker in the recent past when he allowed the accusation of a criminal cabal within the PPP leveled by a Member of Parliament, Desmond Trotman, to pass despite vehement objections from our side. The condoning of such unethical behavior in the noble House not only serves to fortify the opposition in the relentless attacks on the PPP, but is demonstrative of the embracement of lawlessness by those who purport to be working assiduously for a better Guyana. Nothing can be further from the truth. For the opposition's hypocrisy on security and law and order continues to be unprecedented. That said, we are not unaware of the opposition's recent response to comments by our party. The opposition must be reminded that it is a PPP-led government that continues to provide the enabling environment through retooling, training, resources, infrastructure, so that law enforcement agencies can better execute their duties. It is a PPP-led government that brought to the National Assembly the Firearms Amendment Bill, which will strengthen laws to curb gun trading and related criminal activities. It is a PPP government that has established the SWAT unit, which will further boost the crime-fighting capacity of law enforcement. It is a PPP-led government which has tabled the Anti-Money Laundering and Containing the Financing of Terrorism Act and continues its relentless efforts to have it passed to stave off Guyana and Guyanese from further consequences. These actions alone serve only to demonstrate the PPP government's commitment to implement measures to combat all forms of criminal activities, but to forthrightly debunk the opposition's accusations leveled against our party. These are the facts, and the Guyanese must remain cognizant of the opposition's attempt to mislead and force the harsh consequences of being blacklisted upon them. If the opposition is so concerned about security for our people and criminal activities, then why would they not support the SWAT unit and the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Act? Why would they not support the act, which would enhance the capacity of law enforcement to deal with money launderers, drug dealers, and the operators of other illegal businesses? The party believes that if the opposition were to desist from their habitual procrastinating tendencies and were to endeavor to contribute meaningfully to nation building, then the passage of the legislation like the Anti-Money Laundering and countering the Financing and Terrorism Act would be routine. More so, their capacity to appreciate the challenges faced and the processes involved in combating organized crime would be enhanced. The opposition must therefore commit to putting the welfare of the nation above their own self-interest. Guyanese and all of civil society must demand no less. Next statement is as follows. The People's Progressive Party has for some time been exposing the bias which the Starbuck News has had in favor of the PNC-led APNU and against the People's Progressive Party. As General Secretary of the party, I have expressed on many occasions the view that the Starbuck News in particular has an agenda which is about removing the PPP from government and replacing it with the People's National Congress. When Barbara Haig came to Guyana in 1986 with the check from the National Endowment for Democracy to establish the Starbuck News, the stated goal was to ensure that there was a press in Guyana that would provide balanced reporting and contribute to an informed democracy where the citizens can make their own deliberate decisions. Today, the Starbuck News has not only departed from this noble objective, but has blatantly become the mouthpiece of the opposition. Not wanting to arrive at this conclusion, in spite of what informed sources have said to us, the PPP did an analysis of the coverage which the Starbuck News has from September-December 2013 given the parliamentary political parties. These are our findings. 1. In the 4-month period, the Starbuck News covered these three political parties 68 times. The PNC-APNU has 68% of the coverage. The AFC had 24% of the coverage, while the party with the largest amount of seats in the National Assembly, the PPP, had less than 10% of the coverage. The other interesting finding that the PPP discovered was that during the period, the Starbuck News totally blanked the PPP press conferences from its newspapers' pages. I repeat, during this period, there was no coverage of the PPP press conferences by the Starbuck News. Rather, the newspaper covered more than 50% of the APNU press conferences. These hard facts now empirically confirm that the PPP, what the PPP has known for some time about the pro-APNU anti-PPP position of the Starbuck News. The PPP has no problem with any media house endorsing and or supporting a political view or a political party of their choice. However, all media houses have a duty to be responsible in providing balanced coverage of prevailing political views. The PPP encourages its members and supporters and sympathizers to be vigilant to ensure that they are all informed about the party's positions on the issues through the several other sources to which they have access.
Thank you. Now, questioning.
All right.
Usual.
Yeah. I'll go back to the anti-money laundering bill first of all. What is the view that the government itself isn't interested in passing the anti-money laundering bill? And old people like me would remember when we were talking nationalization and the late President Jagan said to Burnham, no, until he got concessions, then he supported. AFC has one concession, give us the BPC. Why did the government grant the concession? You needed just 2 votes in the National Assembly. If you wanted the bill passed, you granted one concession. It cost you nothing.
If I was surprised when I opened the Kaieteur News this morning and I read the editorial stating, does the government really want to pass the anti-money laundering bill? It shocked me. And I'll tell you the reason why. If this government, to which I belong, to which the PPP, the ruling party, was not interested and as I said before, was mamagain about the consequences of that would flow from this bill not being passed in the National Assembly. I think it would be putting us in a rather foolhardy position. Why would a government, and I think we all understand what we mean by a government, why would a government shoot itself in the foot by going through all these measures, going to such great pains, if it was a question of it not really wanting? I think those of us who scour the international media and the institutions associated with governance of the financial institutions would know that the consequences are dire for countries that do not fulfill certain best practices in respect of money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. Only recently we saw the experience of Belize. So I don't know where this view is coming from, that this government is pamphleting in respect of the bill, which it is pushing aggressively, spent so many hours, man-hours, to deal with this matter. In fact, I think the opposition should be asked us a question. Are they really interested in Guyana's national interests? Because it would seem to me that while in Belize the opposition eventually came around to the position when they say they may complain, but they have to comply, I think that is quite applicable in our situation here. What we're witnessing here is a classical case of brinkmanship. This is a classical case of brinkmanship, where the opposition wants to prove something which I think investigative journalists should seek to find out. What is it they're seeking to prove, or what is it they're seeking to push this government to some cliffhanger type of situation?
But the question still remains, why not grant a simple concession?
My friend, what you're asking for, or what you are suggesting, is not just a simple concession. I think the government has spoken, the government spokespersons, I should say, have spoken ad nauseum on the issue or the concession which the opposition is seeking to wrest from the hands of the government. That is to say, to remove the cabinet from the whole question of no objections to contracts. This is a major concession. You're seeking to remove the cabinet rule from even foreign funded projects and to put it in the hands of an unknown quantity. It is not a simple concession. It is not a question of a quid pro quo. It is not a question of bargaining. Both cases have to be discussed on the basis of their merits and demerits. And they ought not to be linked.
Yeah, next.
What was your comparative analysis for the other three newspapers?
Excuse me?
What was your comparative analysis to the other three newspapers in relation to coverage of the political parties?
What was our
Comparative analysis. You did one on Starboard News. I assume that you did one on the other three newspapers to see what the coverage was.
We don't have any complaints against the other newspapers for covering our press conferences.
So, sir, Neil West from Capital News. Why then did you drop out the Starboard News analysis?
Because we noticed there was a trend. We noticed there was a trend. And to establish the trend, we obviously had to do the comparative analysis, lest the bright minds who come here every Monday, and unless it is adjusted every Tuesday, like your good self, would ask us on what scientific basis did we arrive to this analysis or conclusion.
Next.
Sir, we heard a litany of political elements associating with criminals, drug lords, and we hear these things coming from both sides. Old me, I lived through that period. But
So did I.
yeah, a lot of these young people don't know anything about that.
What does that mean? We shouldn't talk about it?
Well, you can talk, but it means nothing. But the big issue, sir,
Okay.
is that all the political parties, I believe, seem to be doing are alienating themselves from each other when they keep throwing dirt at each other. For example, the opposition will talk about, this is so long, who started the riots in 1961, 62, who killed the first person. I mean, that's the Changur had a song.
Yeah, I know it. It
Out
used
of
to
the
play every
blackness
morning on
came
the
bomb
radio.
gun, Rajan Monroe dying,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
threw the bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, we can keep pointing fingers. To what good? To what end? These people don't know anything about it and they don't care.
I'm not so sure that they don't care.
They are okay with it.
No, you can't carry the survey now, Adam. But yesterday in Parliament, Mr. Bulkan stood up and gave his interpretation of the historical evolution of the local government process. A similar exercise was done by Mr. Basil Williams. But it was not so much Mr. Basil Williams that got the brunt of the heckling and the criticism from members on the government benches. It was, fundamentally speaking, Mr. Bulkan. And some of the hecklers on the government side was alleging that Mr. Bulkan knew nothing of the history as to why we are delayed in respect to the holding of local government elections. And it was one of the members on the opposition benches made a remark which attracted my attention. She said, he may not have been there throughout the negotiations that took place between Mr. Hoyt and Mr. Jackview, between Mr. Corbyn and Mr. Jackview. But he's a good researcher. That's what they said of their person. He's a good researcher. Now that tells us that you don't necessarily have to be born 150 years ago to have a fairly good appreciation of what took place at that time. But if you were to do your research well, you would obviously get very much acquainted with it to the point where you might even be able to rewrite the history or to capture the history in a novel, a play, or a poem. So the present generation or the present crop of journalists, if I may respectfully submit, Adam, did not necessarily have to be there in the 60s as we were. But I think that they can go back to the archives and read and get a fairly good appreciation of what took place there. Now, the question as to whether they're interested, I wouldn't want to pass judgment on that. I wouldn't want to pass judgment on that. But so that's one aspect of the thing that you pose. The second aspect had to do with where is this all leading to? I think we have to focus on the question of facts versus fiction. When we speak to these matters, we speak to the facts. We do not invent anything whatsoever. All that was said so far in this press release and in the other one a couple of weeks ago are factual. The others that are thrown at us are mainly allegations, claims, suspicions, and so forth. So we have to set the record straight, and in fact, we are making a contribution to history, because if we don't speak about these things, and if we don't convey them to the current generation, how would they know? They either have to go back and do the research, or they read what you print and what you publish. And that would lead them, of course, to going to do the research, because then they would want to ask themselves the question, what is it Mr. Rohi is talking about? What is it Mr. Granger is talking about? I better go and check it out in the archive. So we make a contribution. You may not be aware of it, if I may respectfully submit, but your newspaper is certainly helping people to investigate matters.
So I have questions of two issues. Sir, could you say with that would it be IFATA, that's what it said, the International Financial Action Task Force? Did they specifically say that Guyana was up for review in Paris at this time?
I understand that they were in the pool of countries. That Guyana is in a pool of countries. Sorry, I correct myself. That Guyana is in a pool of countries that are in a priority, that have been prioritized for review.
But did they say specifically that Guyana was up for review this time, this 9 to 13 period?
My reading of the literature tells me that there are a pool of countries that are up for review this year, come a specific date. That's what I understand from the literature.
But the government sent no representatives to Paris, no?
Pardon?
The government did not send any representatives to Paris.
Well, when is the meeting?
It finishes today.
No.
Tomorrow. No, Thursday.
Yeah, we were hoping. Well, today's cabinet, we'll discuss the matter there, and then we'll see what comes out of the cabinet deliberation, which I suppose one of the spokespersons from cabinet will alert you about.
But at this time, you don't know of anyone who is assigned to go to
No, I don't know of anyone who is assigned to go to Paris.
And why, sir, would the Prime Minister set the next meeting of Parliament so far back when the aim is to get the amendments into the present legislation that is being fashioned?
These dates are usually negotiated between the two chief whips. So I think it came out of a process of negotiations between the two sides.
Yes, can you provide an update on the discussions between the government and the US and the local US 1 point on the LEAD project?
As far as I'm aware, there'd be no further movement from the last war that we've had some time ago.
Getting back to Summer News, what were some of your controls to decide what was deemed as coverage or not? Was it a headline, your name in the headline? Did you have to be the lead? Was it one sentence, one paragraph? Was it no balance to have anybody else in the article? What was the deciding factor?
Let me go through them one by one. I'm not interested in my name. I'm interested in the party. I'm not interested in one line or a byline or whatever you may want to call it. That's not our interest. Our interest is the contents of the statements that are read at these press briefings. Other newspapers, other media houses have been, as far as I am concerned, as far as we are concerned, when we assess these things every week, we can't say that we're fully satisfied. We can't say we're fully satisfied. But when we look comparably to what they publish and what they say on their TV programs compared to what the Starbuck News prints and publishes, clearly that is not to our satisfaction.
But that's what I'm asking. What are some of your controls? What are you measuring against?
We're measuring the contents, what you may call it, let me see.
You do the content analysis.
No. In my days at the Mirror when I was I was a journalist at one time, and I still consider myself a journalist not by profession, but by compulsion. Column space, is that what you call it? Column inches. We measure it by column inches. How many column inches are assigned by various newspapers?
Just a bit more concise?
Pardon?
Couldn't it be if the Starbuck News is just a bit more concise?
Well, that is not for us to. That's
But
an
that's what you're measuring.
That's an editorial matter. I wouldn't want to go down that road.
But isn't that what you're measuring? If you're
We're measuring the amount of column inches that are given to our press statements, the frequency with which it is carried, and all those things.
I And you're saying from September to December, there was no coverage of any of your,
Press statement, that's correct. Of our press statements.
and I can say that that's not true.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on.
Mr.
We will be issuing the statement. We'll be issuing the statement, so we'll be able to study it a little closer.
Well, I'm gonna assume that you have the information in front of you, that's why you're reading from it, correct? I'm gonna assume that if I took a look at it at the end,
Yeah, but
I would see
yeah, but
everything that you would
yeah, but
study.
madam, if I may call you so, or Miss Pushpa, I don't think we want to distract the attention of your colleague journalists with who's right and who's wrong at this point in time.
I don't mind the topic.
10%.
I do. I have cabinet at 10.
We get 10% coverage.
Sir,
Yeah,
I-
that big.
Yeah, I think it was reported here we have 10% coverage.
Yeah, but you're not telling me what your control was to measure coverage, so therefore it's arbitrary in nature. It doesn't actually make sense because there's no control in what you're covering and what you're measuring as coverage.
I don't want to get into those technicalities at this point in time. You know, we are not people
So then
who
it's
work
just
in
a
newspaper
thought, it's not an
editorials,
actual
so we won't measure that
study.
like that.
Mr. Rodney, I want to ask you about something you said in your first statement. I don't have the benefit of it in front of me, so I won't quote you exactly.
Uh-huh.
But one of the statements you made was regarding Mr. Desmond Trotman and his statement in the National Assembly.
Correct.
As I recall it, the ruling of the Speaker was that Mr. Trotman did not actually say that the PPP has a criminal cabal, but rather he was quoting from a newspaper article, and hence his ruling to allow it to go. Am I correct?
Well, he didn't say he was quoted from a newspaper article. He said people are saying that outside.
Right, so it wasn't his words, which is why...
But he
the
said it
Speaker
in the
allowed
Parliament.
to go.
But he said it in the Parliament.
Yeah, but the Speaker allowed it on the basis that it wasn't his words.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree. I'm not contesting the Speaker's ruling.
It seems that that's what
No.
he said.
If that is the impression I conveyed, no. I'm not contesting the Speaker's ruling. All that I'm saying that it was allowed to pass. He ruled that it be allowed to pass.
So he should not have ruled that it passed.
Sir, quickly, one last thing I want to take you away from.
All right, yes.
No, you say you're not answering the question.
No.
Neil.
He's asking me another question.
You got another
I was
question?
asking if the Speaker should not have allowed that to pass.
No, I wrote to the Speaker, afterwards, and I did raise my objections to it. But the Speaker is the final arbiter in the court of the House. I can't do nothing more about that. Once he's ruled, I have to live with it. Yeah.
Quickly, I just wanted to take you to your position as Minister of Home Affairs. There has been a major breakthrough in the number 51 village area. Do you attribute that to removing the entire police station, or do you attribute it to...
Moving the police station.
You removed the entire, well, it's the police. You know what I mean? You cleared the police station.
Well, when I'm speaking to you journalists, I have to be very careful with language.
But do you attribute the breakthrough to the fact that you cleared the entire police station and replaced the ranks? Or is it better policing on the parts of the police and police?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. I think one of the principal factors perhaps might have been that the pressure from the residents themselves, from the people themselves, encouraged the police to be much more diligent in the investigation, to be much more aggressive in the investigations. Because you see, as you and I would know, the police wouldn't want to be at odds, so to speak, with the residents in any village or any community. And given the fact that this protest by these villagers gained national attention, I think it sent a message, like so many protests send messages to the police that they need to do a much more thorough job in those particular areas.
And have you issued any sort of congratulations to them for...
To the police, the Minister of Home Affairs don't necessarily do that for every time the police because I'll be writing letters all day. I'll be writing congratulatory letters every day. What I do, I wait on specific occasions when all are gathered, when the eagles have gathered, not even landed. And I would then make a public, commendation to them.
Rommel's extension, he was 55 last week, Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
And he's still commissioned, he hasn't retired.
Mhm.
Have you approved an extension for him, and if so, for how long?
I can't say. You remember, the Commissioner of Police is usually appointed by the head of state. You see? So that rests with His Excellency, who's commander of the discipline forces, to make that call.
Police Service Commission.
Pardon?
Police Service Commission. No, the Police Service Commission got to make a recommendation or something.
With respect to the extension? Not necessarily.
But you make a recommendation, that I know.
You know that I made a recommendation.
You know it too. How much you give him? 2 years?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that. I think let's leave that to the office of the president to pronounce.
One final question.
Yeah, Mr. Riley, the opposition leader has said that the police force's capability of investigating allegations of torture, Office of Professional Responsibility and the Police Complaints Authority are not capable of doing that. Could I ask for your thoughts on that, please?
I think that's a political statement. Granger is making all those statements to give a political spin to what his views are on security. I wouldn't be as definitive as he is on such matters. Now, there's something in Parliament that is coming up soon. There's a motion in the Parliament that is coming up soon to address the question of police torture from 2006 to current. Yeah, those matters I think will be fully ventilated there, but I wouldn't be as definitive as he is. I think his statements are merely politically loaded. I don't think they're helpful to the police. Listen, everyone recognizes that there are deficiencies in the police force. I made the point that with such a massive organization, you will have deviations from the standing orders from time to time, which can be very costly for the organization. Now, as Adam said just now, when he posited that question about where are we going with this constant beating of this issue, who did what and who didn't do what in the 60s and so forth. Let's extrapolate from that. Where are we going to go with this constant bashing of the police? I have said from time to time, when the police does a good job, we should congratulate them. And I haven't seen for the longest while, anything that is of a congratulatory nature from the opposition in respect to the police. I think the police should be given as much encouragement. I think we should engage in what was called constructive criticism of the police. Not to destroy them, because the moment you keep bashing them every time you open your mouth, you alienate them from you. And I don't know if Granger wants to alienate himself from the police, unless he has some other connection with the police that I don't know about. But I mean, all things being equal, I don't think the constant bashing the police is helpful. I think it's good enough, yes, to criticize them when criticism is due, but we should also congratulate them when, congratulations are in order. So we bring some balance. That's all I'm asking for. We should bring some balance to what our assessment is of the force. Because after all, it's our police force. It's our police force. So we have to press them to do a better job. We have to keep pressing them to do a better job. And we have to congratulate them when they do a good job.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ryan, I get 2 questions as we go in.